Good evening. This is the School Board of Lee County Board Board Workshop, and the agenda is to talk about board support of legislation concerning student assessment. And I am going to turn to our legislative consultant, Mr. Bob Serra, and ask him to walk us through this. And Mr. Serra and Mr. Teuber have worked together on this document, so I'm going to ask them to guide us as we try to give you the information you need to proceed.
Thank you. Just a little bit of background. We all know that beginning in August, a significant amount of the community began talking to the board about concerns around testing issues, standards, data collection, a number of different questions and issues related to the state's accountability system. And we know that many of the concerns that they have are not actually under the control of the school board, but the school board did address some of the concerns that they had, including looking at the district's testing calendar and making adjustments to some of the district-mandated tests that existed. In fact, I think we can say that we've eliminated all of those exams that were purely based on your mandate. Shortly after that initial activity, the Greater Florida Consortium of School Boards had its legislative platform development meeting, and several of our board members and one of our board-elect members went to Palm Beach to work with school boards from 10 other districts to discuss some of these issues and our experiences, and to come together with a joint platform that we hoped would address some of those concerns, and certainly the ones that we believed in professionally. And that platform on these testing and accountability issues, primarily there were two planks as it related to these issues. One was that we believe that the state should examine their testing mandates, and with an eye towards having fewer tests and more time for instruction. So that was plank one. And plank two was a position to address the high stakes nature of testing, and to say that that the testing shouldn't be high stakes, and that it should be for diagnostic purposes. And so that was our position, and the platform development adopted it. It took almost 2 months after that meeting for each of the 11 school boards to fully adopt that platform, for it to officially be the platform of the consortium. But shortly after that meeting, I received some inquiries from our delegation members who wanted to know what the consortium draft said and what it meant. And I talked to several of those members about it, and I sent a blast memo to all the delegation members to open that dialogue for anyone who was interested. And I described those two planks, and on the fewer tests there was very little pushback, but there was the question, which test specifically do you want to eliminate, and which test would you say should be retained? And so that's something that I need to get some more input on above and beyond the platform statement, which you have adopted at this point, so I feel comfortable in working on. The second plank, where it dealt with kind of the high stakes nature of the testing, in discussing that with the delegation, there was a little pushback on that, because there's a belief if there's not a high stakes nature to the test, in the long run, that it impacts the quality of the diploma, but also that it impacts the ability to have even a grading system or those kinds of things, or even an accountability system at all, because some of the things that are considered to be high stakes might be even things like the school grade and some of the other impacts that might happen to a school, like additional state oversight under differentiated accountability or some of the other sanctions that might exist. And so in looking at that and having a little bit of conversation with some of the delegation members to understand where they were individually, because they haven't met about it as a group yet either, I came to the recommendation within the platform that we had adopted that possibly we should look at the sanctions question as a 2-year issue, which would align with what the Superintendent's Association had asked for in their platform, but it also professionally we know that the new state assessments that are designed to measure the Florida standards are in a development mode, even though we're going to utilize them this year, and that it would a 2-year waiting period for the test to be fully vetted and for the entire accountability system to be modeled where it was not actually issued as this is what it is, but we're actually in the modeling process of deciding what it should be. We don't believe that there's anything that is anti-school accountability to have that kind of waiting period and that kind of development process. So looking at that as being a 2-year period is slightly different than the adopted position, but it's something that I think in talking to some of the delegation members would increase the chances that we would find a sponsor from our own delegation for these 2 items. And in addition on that item, I need to get some direction about which specific sanctions you want to have waived. And so I'm going to outline some options, and assuming that everybody's in consensus, then that'll be what we take back up at the action meeting and what the community can respond to. And before even getting into the specific 7 points of the bill under those 2 topics, I would point out that in getting a local sponsor from the delegation, we're helping the community to have an additional champion and touch point where we know that there are going to be bills on accountability this year. And certainly in both the House and Senate, we would expect that the leadership on education policy will be the ones carrying those bills, and those members are not likely to be members from our delegation. So by having one of our delegation members to carry these 2 items that this board has specifically adopted in response to the concerns that have been raised in the community helps us to have a place where if these are not the only 2 things that some people in the community want, they have a place to go to talk about their additional concerns. So with that, we have 2 topics that you have adopted in that consortium platform, and underneath those, we want to look at, for the reduction in the testing, we looked at the PERT test, which is a recently adopted test. It has only been utilized, and I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years, but it's recently adopted. We clearly had a state accountability system without the PERT test, and so that is a suggestion. And we looked at then a number of tests that would be offered for the first time this school year. So it's even, for those that are complaining about too much testing, these tests haven't even been issued yet. This would be the first time, but traditionally we've had FCAT writing in 3 grades, 4th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. And starting this year, we're going to have a writing component in each of those grades, 4 through 10. So that's a number of additional exams and a number of additional hours and days spent testing in additional grades that we didn't need for the accountability system for the last 15 years, and we probably don't need that moving forward. We also looked at the 11th grade language arts exam, where the 10th grade exam is still going to be the graduation requirement in the long-term view of the existing law. And so why do we need a state exam at 11th grade? And we've had a 10th grade reading FCAT for a long time. As we transition to the Florida standards, we certainly would have a 10th grade language arts exam, but do we need an 11th grade one? If people are complaining about too much testing, I would argue that we could probably live without that 11th grade exam. So those are the recommendations on that portion. I would note, and I don't know the name of the high school math teacher, but one of our employees, our faculty, contacted the superintendent and noted that the PERT exam right now within the state law is the only exam that has a concordant score to substitute for the Algebra 1 end of course exam, which is also a graduation requirement. And that's important. And so now we need to look at, well, can we eliminate a test and still have that valuable component? Because for a number of students who passed algebra and have the credits that they need to graduate, or are expected to have the credits they need to graduate, passing that exam may be the only thing that they have left, and at this point they've failed that exam multiple times for whatever reason. And the PERT exam was another way and another opportunity to do it where potentially we were getting away from whatever was causing them the trouble on the specific Algebra 1 exam. My suggestion to you is if you adopt these recommendations, I will work on my draft to make sure that the state DOE is required to have concordant scores on 4 specific exams: the pre-SAT, the pre-ACT, the SAT, and the ACT, to substitute for that. And that would eliminate that problem, assuming that appropriate concordant scores are created. But I certainly felt that was good input, and that was student-centered input, and so I think that you would want to address that issue, and I can assure you that with this recommendation, we would make sure that isn't lost, and everybody should know that if this bill is considered by the legislature, and if it was passed by the legislature, the PERT nor any of these other tests would be eliminated until next school year. This will happen after this year, and so the PERT for this year will have that concordant score, and we'll have a year to look at the other issues that are involved. Now, in looking at the other recommendation about addressing the high stakes nature of the existing testing program, we looked at what is high stakes for the students. And the ones we looked at were the ones that were truly high stakes, in particular, 3rd grade promotion, retention. We looked at high school graduation for the students. We looked at, for the schools, the school grade is a consequence of the system, and that is something that impacts all the students in that school. And if the test, again, is not reliable and valid, then everything that flows from that test has questionable reliability and validity. So why would we want to put something out there to the public that wasn't reliable and valid? And why would we treat students in that manner either? Finally, we looked at the additional levels of state oversight as it related to differentiated accountability. So those were the areas we looked at, the 4 areas that we looked at for this draft bill. I can say that it probably does not solve all of the problems of the universe that we know that the community has brought, some of which I think you do support and some of which I don't know that you do and that the staff does. But I believe that this creates a cornerstone bill that I believe that one of our delegation members would be willing to sponsor, and hopefully that many of the others would be willing to co-sponsor. And it creates, again, this touch point where we have the ability to go forward as additional items might come forward to us or to them, research them, and determine whether they're appropriate for that bill as well. And so that is the history and the recommendation as it's come. Certainly, we could talk about additional tests that you would want to remove or additional sanctions you might want to have addressed, but that is the recommendation.
Steve, do you want to add
Yeah,
something?
and thank you, Bob, for summarizing. And I guess, we've heard from the public, and a lot of discussion has talked about all the different components that are currently being expressed in as problems in the state of Florida. And we had numerous discussions in Tampa with all the different boards, and there's 16 different boards that already have resolutions out. And yet last night, I told the board where it was over on the FSBA list, all 16. For us to address, it's not something we have to do with such an urgency like we're here today to give the legislature. So we'll have that back as another workshop. So I mean, there's issue upon issue and layer upon layer that we have to address, and there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed, and we understand that. But when you talk about legislation, there is going to be a bill that the FSBA supported, and our board, as part of the FSBA, we supported, and the Superintendents Association also supported. That's going to go, and they've already got a sponsor on the Senate side, and I'm sure they'll find a complement on the House. But that's going to be a very big omnibus bill that's going to ask for all the things that we want fixed in one fell swoop. Well, if that goes through, that's great. But if it doesn't, or it gets changed or derailed, now we're looking at a position where we're making no progress, and more tests are coming out, and we're not making incremental changes that are actually fixed. The biggest things that we, and Dr. Graham alluded to it when she was up in Tampa, this happened over years, that it just kind of, the DOE kept making changes and doing things, and now we're at a point where it's actually, it's just beyond broke. And we finally all know, everybody finally realizes it, the fact came true in Tampa, and Lee County knows it. The catalyst was, what happened here really brought attention to it. So we're now trying to say, okay, let's take a look if we could have a cornerstone, or a legislative bill that could actually have a good chance of success. We actually give the same people with all the passion, if they want to help, now we need to help. But this is not going to change our board going up there by ourselves, even our consortium with our group. We're not going to get enough momentum to change the legislature with some of their preconceived notions and their entrenchment with the Florida DOE. But so we have to be able to find conduits, or as Bob said, touch points, where everybody can come in and help us and let the legislature know we need to make these changes. And when they start listening, this is a good place to open it up to say, to be able to work the next iterative steps, and actually to have those discussions regarding all of high stakes testing, regarding all of the tests that we're doing, how we grade our teachers, all those steps that all of us have concerns with. So I was very supportive, and I'm glad that Bob took the time and got with our legislative delegation, because again, they have to actually be willing to carry the water, and if we get too far out there, we won't get a sponsor. Then again, we're back in that position that we don't even get to pay to play. So it's politics. I know people may not like it, but that's the arena that we're forced into. So that's all I have to say. Is I commend Bob to push it as far as he thought we could get to save it, and based upon the reaction of our delegation, I think we could get a sponsor in both the Senate and the House, which would be very powerful, and allow us to at least move forward and get us with a movement to start.
And Dr. Graham, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just want to reiterate a little bit of what Bob said about the PERT. And in my recommendation, it says to eliminate it, and that's in response to what we believe the legislators are willing to do, and the fact that our community wants us to work really hard at eliminating some of the tests. After speaking with the teacher who is here tonight, and I imagine she'll speak, it is, for whatever reason, when the kids are unable to get through the algebra, the PERT seems to be the one that they really wrap themselves around and they do well, even though it's new. So I have a concern. I feel a little better because we've got this year, and then we can talk about another way to either use it maybe just as the algebra substitute rather than making everybody take. But I'm going to leave it in the recommendation for sake of your discussion, but just this teacher was at the meeting Monday night, actually, and came to me afterwards very passionately. She's concerned about, and it's the low, you know, we are required to have kids in algebra unless they have an IEP that says they don't take algebra, they're going to take algebra. And some of the kids that have to go into remediation, this seems to be the one assessment that works for them. And it concerns me a little bit to take that away. But I'm going to leave it in the recommendation, and you all can have that discussion. But I do understand the importance that we send forward something, and I appreciate that the board's willing to go out and do this. We do need to send something that is palatable to those, not only to our local delegates that may be willing to carry it, but to their colleagues that may be willing to vote for it. Because if we went for everything, we might get nothing. This way we have a chance of beginning to whittle down some of what's in the accountability system.
Okay, so let's work through this step by step. First up then would be the number of tests. And the first thing on the docket, I guess, is PERT. And so I guess the question is, board members, are you looking for any more information about PERT?
The PERT would be used as an optional piece? This is my question. How would we be using PERT? I'm hesitant to not do it at all this year for the sake of some students that would really benefit from it.
Again, nothing will impact this year.
Okay.
That I'm confident in, because the bill won't pass until session is over, and then it's signed, and so we're talking about next school year. There will be a PERT exam this year.
Okay.
It will be a potential substitute for algebra. What we actually drafted in, I have language, but I didn't really want you to sit here and have to nitpick language. If you give me the bullets, I can get the language that creates it. We were going to allow the state to look at a substitute for PERT that was not a state-designed exam and that would meet more than one requirement, such as if the state offered the pre-SAT or the pre-ACT to every high school student to fill the same function that PERT was going to offer, which is to basically be a measure of college readiness. We already have a great percentage of our students that were taking the pre-ACT or pre-SAT, I don't know which one we're using, but that are doing it because that's how you qualify for National Merit Scholars. That's another way to prepare for taking the SAT later. So a good number of our 11th graders are taking that already. And if the state wanted to go ahead and have every student take that as kind of a mandated situation, well, why would we need to also have the PERT? And then for half the students, well, they would be taking the ACT, the pre-SAT or the pre-ACT anyway. And for the other half that would only have been taking PERT, well, they're still having the same number of exams, not a reduced number, but we will have reduced it for some. So that was kind of the way we were looking at that internally. And then the concern is there is not currently a concordant score for algebra. The DOE has been terribly slow. Every time, even that the law requires them to have a concordant score for each of these exams to create one. So I would need to add language into the bill that required them to have concordant scores on these 4 exams and have it by a date certain so that it would definitely be in place in time for students that might need that kind of relief in the 2015 school year. So we put it on them to do that research and get it done quickly. I can't assure anybody that the score will be as fair as the one for PERT, but they were the ones that established the score for PERT, and so I have every reason to believe that it would be as fair.
Mrs. Dozier.
As I've sat here and I've listened to everything that you've said, Mr. Sarah, and I appreciate the work that you've done, and Steve, I appreciate what you've done, but I feel as though where I'm coming from is I feel as though we're almost back where we started at ground zero again. And I really don't like being here. Because I'm thinking about what we were able to accomplish for maybe a few hours back at FSBA this summer, which was a major coup. And then all of a sudden, a board member that had been defeated came back and made a motion, and it got taken away, and they were going to deal with it in December, which I was most disappointed about that. And I think a lot of the members there were disappointed because it was like 13 to 11. It was the split of the vote. And the one thing that you said, and you've said it 2 or 3 times, and I understand legislation, that it will not affect anything this year. My question is, what can we do to get some relief this year? Can we go through DOE? Can we go to the governor? But how can we get some relief this year? I think that is what these parents that I have been speaking to, that's their expectation, that something's going to be done this year, because it just seems like it's just, you know, it's surmounted and gotten larger and larger and larger, and nothing has been accomplished, even though we've been sitting here in the little hamster wheel and we haven't done anything. And I have a high level of frustration, so I know what my level is can't be nearly as much as the parent that has the child that's going to be affected by these tests. So my question is, what can we do to get some immediate relief?
Okay, but the purpose of this workshop was to talk about legislation. So let's have a conversation.
But excuse me, I will tell you that is part of the workshop, to
Okay.
get immediate relief. That's working with your legislature to get some immediate relief. And I'm not trying to be hard to get along with. Please don't think that. But I mean, I just there are options to
Okay.
get things done for this year.
Okay, then I'll give you an opportunity to bring those forward, but I want to give Mr. Toybris a moment to speak.
And Ms. Dozier, I understand your frustration, and that's the point that I was trying to make, that today is about the language. This Bob actually wanted this language. He tried to get it. He was requesting it back in October. They wanted it in late October. And the state legislature, our delegation needs to have this language for this session going forward. That doesn't mean that's what we do tonight. We're going to come back with our resolution. You know, for example, Orange County, they've adopted that they're going to count their VAM scores this year, so minuscule that it virtually doesn't count. You know, and there's discussion, and I've gotten with their lobbyist, and Bob's had that discussion as well, the legalities of it. And my point is, if you know, whether it's illegal or not, you know, if we do it and they say we can't, okay, well then we at least got through this year. So those are discussions that I agree with you, but those aren't for today. You know, that's what I keep telling everybody. There's so much to do and so many layers of this. If we don't stay focused and do each layer and each thing in its proper time, you get distracted. That conversation is going to be an hour or two conversation with this board, and I encourage it, and we can have it next week. But this week, you know, I had to cram a meeting in because I really wanted it before we went to the FSBA. But you know, this board's only been active for 2 weeks, and so I just can't. You couldn't cram it in there. And Bob's ready to go because our legislator's ready to do. You know, this is going to be a multi-pronged, continuous approach on a bunch of different layers. And so that's something that I think that I just respectfully ask if we would set up a time and recognize that that's going to happen, how we're going to do there. But our legislature, our legislative delegation, and our governor is not going to be part of that party. That's, you know, we have to make a decision. What do we want to do? What we're willing to endure? What we're willing to direct the superintendent to go for this year? I'm good with that, and I think it's going to be something that I think that the people that have been looking for solutions this year, you know, are going to be part of, and I think they're going to, you know, support us in our decision, and we'll go through it. But for now, we need to take a look at when we're up in Tallahassee and we're getting them to change statute. Where's our focus?
So as I understand it, let's just back up. The purpose of this meeting is to talk about legislation to bring to our legislative representative, our delegation. We will have another meeting at a future date at which you And Mr. Sarah will have worked through the various resolutions done by the various districts and the consortiums and whatever, and come to us with a draft so that at the beginning of the calendar year, we can have a conversation and approve a resolution going forward and act independently as a board on that. But what we're working on right now is direction specifically to Mr. Sarah about the legislative component that we want to advance in this session.
Correct.
Okay, are we comfortable with that? Mrs. Dozier?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable with it.
Ms. La Riviere? Welcome to the school board.
We're stuck because we weren't a full board as we are now, except for the last 2 weeks. No, I guess it's now 3 weeks because the 18th. And I don't know. I've lost track of all time. Ideally, what would have been wonderful was for us to go ahead and develop our full resolution and what we wanted to do that piece. Right now, we've got to get this done. I understand the urgency because the committees people are already meeting in their committees for any bills that they want to bring forward. So I understand the urgency of getting this piece completed. I would like to see, hopefully, we can get this done very quickly. And I wish we had another hour between this time. I wish we had a little bit more time so that we could start putting in and talking about things that we would like to have in that resolution.
And there's no reason, if we get through this quickly, there's no reason we can't give bullets to Steve and Bob to work on when they proceed with the resolution piece.
Okay.
So let's just, yeah.
Okay. The only other aspect that I would look at, Bob, is that I still believe we need some language in there. I believe we need another assessment besides the FSA that districts may have the option of using instead of the FSA, and have it be another type of a norm reference test. We don't know how it's going to play. I don't know how it's going to play, and that would be a conversation you look at. I understand, too, we've got legislators out there, and I'm sorry to say, I'm going to go ahead and tell what political party I am, but most of them are my political party, and they're not going to go for a lot of this. So I'm going to trust your judgment so that we can come up with something so it will make some definite changes so that it benefits our kids. In the long run, we're going to keep on doing what we need to do to try to enforce some changes and take consequences if we need to. But I believe that we just need to move forward with this. You talk with you guys, you're the state legislature person. Talk with our delegates. See if they would support some type of language like that. If we can put that in, that would be great. But if our own delegates aren't going to support, don't buy into it, I guarantee you the rest of the state won't either. Because the whole problem with FSA is not just the high stakes part, but it's also the fact that students are taking that test where they're not in the high stakes category, and it doesn't really give a true picture of the students, and it's not something we can at this time monitor for student growth.
And Bob, your reaction to that? From a
The only reason, at this point, I don't believe you've adopted the concept of having a substitute to the state exam system that wasn't part of the consortium platform, and it wasn't part of your...
I thought it was in the platform, because we had suggested that the districts would be able to select an assessment.
Okay.
Different from.
I didn't understand it that way, but that's okay.
So that was, yeah.
But I will research this. I don't know what the pushback would be.
I understand.
And there are certainly other norm referenced exams and other nationally normed exams that are aligned with our standards or are generally aligned with our standards that could be used as a substitute to the FSA if we were allowed to do so.
Okay, so do we have agreement that we'll ask Mr. Sarah to pursue that particular question with the legislators independent of the two platform pieces?
I don't have a problem with it running up the flagpole and seeing
Okay.
where that is.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, eventually that's going to, if we don't get a verified, if that test isn't validated and it's not, we're not going to go that route, we're going to have to go to an alternative to some standardized test, so.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Dozier.
Have you had a preliminary conversation that you know this language will, that one of our legislative delegation will be willing to sponsor this specific language?
No. I've had a couple of preliminary discussions with one of the delegation members where we had conversations about some of the about the specific language that was in the Greater Florida Consortium platform when it was still in draft form, and I'm talking about early September. And so I'm basing, but I only limited those positions to the 2 years on the sanctions rather than that sort of being the permanent position at this point based upon that conversation, trying to respect the input that I received and see if that member would be a good sponsor for the bill.
So what you're telling me is what we come up with this language, just because it leaves the table here, it doesn't necessarily give us a guarantee that it's going to be put in the form of a bill and carried by one of our members.
Correct.
There's no guarantee, but what I was told as part of that conversation is to get the specific recommendations of this board. So not just the general bullets, but specifically which tests and specifically which sanctions, and that would be looked at with a strong eye towards having those specifically sponsored and taken to Tallahassee. So there's no guarantee because I didn't know what you would put, what you would agree to, and neither did the member. But I would suggest to you that in good faith on my part and on that member's part that I believe that is in fact what will happen if we agree to these bullets.
And be mindful that to be a time frame, not in perpetuity. In other words, just to cover the gap until they get the testing in order. You know that it has to have a time certain. We can't. You know that's why the 2 year. There are none. I don't believe any in our delegation will support an open-ended bullet.
Okay, so I understand we're a day late and a dollar short. Because after you met, ideally it would have been great if we would have given the particulars of what we wanted to do, so you could have already gone back to that person. However, things as they are kept that from happening, election, and so I understand. So I say let's take it, we go with it, and we go to that person or any others and see what we need to do to tweak it, and we may have to do some going back and forth. But we need to get something to fly that we can
Have a chance.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I know Senator Munford has something he's going to be putting forward, and oh, Lord, I hope that one goes through. You know, but I know there's going to be a lot of pushback for him. So let's go with it.
Okay, so let's go back to, do we want to simply agree with everything that Mr. Sarah has laid out, or do we want to go through item by item and talk about what's on the table? We've talked about PERT, and
I would like to, for this year, and this will be for conversations. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll talk about PERT. I'm jumping ahead.
oh, okay, I thought you were going to talk about PERT.
I'm not going to talk about PERT. I saw something else that jumped in.
I thought
Okay.
that was what we were talking about, PERT.
Yes,
Yeah,
we are.
I know, and then I saw something else. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, we want to put PERT in as one of the tests that we wished to withdraw.
Yes.
We wish to see.
No, I think we're going to get pushback from the community on that.
Well, and that's why I think, all right, let's walk through the others and come back to PERT, because I think the others are going to be fairly straightforward. New FCAT for, I believe it's language arts, grades 4 through 10 instead of 4, 8, and 10.
For the FCAT
Go back to the way,
The
just
way
like,
it was.
just the way FCAT was.
Right,
In other
instead
words,
of
we don't
the-
need it every single year.
FCAT writing, FCAT writing.
I'm sorry, FCAT writing.
Yes.
Yeah,
The specific language is right here in the backup that we have,
okay.
that you are
Yes, it's in the
asking
back.
for. We've got that specific language,
Okay, I got to go back.
Bullets, yes.
Okay, wait a minute.
and there are a total of 7 bullets,
Oh, now where'd you,
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me tell you, I was handed a note by our faculty member on the math that suggested that there was a fear that the pre-SAT and the SAT and the pre-ACT and the ACT have too much geometry and other higher math in them to be a fair substitute for algebra. And, you know, so if we want to have a cornerstone bill that is a clear win for everybody, the community and the staff and the board, then maybe we go ahead and take out PERT and we go ahead and research that, whether there is a better, if there is another substitute that could fulfill that same requirement after this year. We can look at that over the course of the next 2 months, but what we need to do immediately is to get a bill filed so we have a place to then do our work from. So I think the input has been offered in good faith. You know, my suggestion to eliminate the PERT was based on my research that it was a recently adopted exam that fulfilled one function, which was to measure college readiness, and that why did the state of Florida have to develop its own for that purpose? But if it's serving this other purpose, then we could go ahead and eliminate that. We still have the other 6 bullets of our bill, and we go forward with that as the cornerstone, and we can research whether there are other tests that could be eliminated, and if there are other sanctions that could or should be eliminated, and go from there. Because what we ask to be filed and what we get filed will not be the final bill. We'll continue to work on it and negotiate it, but we need to have a starting point, and they wanted to know exactly what it was that you wanted, not just the bullets, but what specific tests.
yes, Mrs. Dozier.
So we've gone from PERT to talking about specifics in each bullet. So what you're saying is we're in, right now, bullet number 2 down here says reduce the number of grades that must, no, that's not it. There was something about test. Where did I see that? Eliminate, no, that's not it. Where does it say?
Reduce the number of grades that must be
reduce
tested
the
in writing.
Reduce the overall amount of state mandated testing. Okay, that's here on this sheet, but am I not seeing it on this sheet?
It's, if you're looking at, are you looking at the agenda item?
Yeah, I'm looking at the agenda
Yeah, if
item.
it's-
Where is it?
Go into the backup, and on the backup you have the seven specifics that cover the same 2 general topics.
It's, okay, we've changed
So
the
there's one in-
language here.
There's 1 and 2 on
Okay.
top, and then the specifics are 1 through 7 underneath.
They explain 1 and 2.
Okay, I guess I'm confused.
Number 1 says reduce the overall amount of state mandated testing, and then if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's the first 4, then talk about which ones to get rid of.
Okay.
And then number 2 is eliminate high stake penalties, and then 5, 6, and 7 talk about those high stakes penalties.
Okay, I'm thinking of, yesterday I opened up the elementary, middle, and high school testing schedule for this year.
Strict assessment.
And I know that some of those tests, even though they are listed as district tests,
At what you got yesterday, they're all state requirements.
okay,
We don't have any of the other anymore.
okay.
All right.
So let's talk about then the number of grades, reduce the number of grades that must be tested in writing. The recommendation is that we go back to
4, 8,
the
and 10.
FCAT, writing 4, 8, and 10, not do the 4 through 10. Are we comfortable with that recommendation? Mrs. Dozier?
If everybody's going to go along with it, I guess I will.
Thank you. Then the next one is remove the third grade English Language Arts exam as a requirement for fourth grade promotion for no less than 2 years.
No. The next one is eliminate the 11th grade English language.
Oh, I am so sorry. You are correct. I skipped down one. Eliminate the third 11th grade state English Language Arts exam. I apologize.
It's redundant. It's not necessary at this time.
Why is it redundant?
No, no, no. No, I'm not talking about the statement. I'm talking about the 11th grade assessment this year. If we give them we already have the 10th grade assessment that they will have taken. That's already made the decisions.
Right.
So there's no sense for them to have to take it's a redundant.
Oh, you're just
test.
saying to have it is redundant.
Yes.
I thought you were saying, yeah, okay.
That this is, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Eliminate
Sorry.
the 11th grade state English Language Arts exam.
Correct.
Now, do we mean it for this year only?
This is for 2 years, correct? We're talking
years.
2 years.
So eliminating the 11th grade exam would be permanent.
Oh, okay.
Eliminating the writing exams that are not the 3 would be permanent. The only items that are 2 years only are the ones that are tied to sanctions. And to be clear, I think the consensus, especially in listening to the faculty and the notes I've been getting, is that we would probably be in a better place to go ahead and take out the recommendation to eliminate PERT right now and to continue the research on that to see if we can find another exam that could serve that purpose simultaneously that kids are already taking already, so that we're reducing the overall number of tests so that we can increase the overall number of hours of instruction. But but keep moving forward. I'll stop taking you backward.
Thank you. Okay. We're talking about the English Language Arts exam. Mrs. Dozier? Mm-hmm. You okay?
Yep.
All right, we're good. Now, remove the third grade English Language Arts exam as a requirement for fourth grade promotion for no less than 2 years.
That's the high stakes.
That's the
Under
high
high
stakes. Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that one.
Mrs. Dozier?
Well, has someone indicated to you that they wanted a time limit on this? And I'm going to tell you how I feel about this. I think that test needs to be eliminated altogether. Please don't do that. And the reason I do is because of the damage that it's doing to third graders. And we've just started this over the course of the last 10 years or so. So,
15 years.
pardon me?
No child left
No
behind.
Child Left Behind came about.
Exactly. So, nobody realizes the damage that it's causing. It can still be used for diagnostic purposes. Is there any way that we can just eliminate that no less than 2 years?
Madam Chair.
You can certainly eliminate it from what you're asking for, and I can forward it to them. But I based upon the initial discussions I have, the not having high-stakes tests forever, in that member's opinion, undermine the ability to have an accountability system. And there was a discussion both about third grade reading, but also about high school promotion and the idea that the diploma in Florida had no value before 1987 or 88 when we had a high school competency exam for the first time. And that was the view, and so at least with that member, I think that it would be a non-starter with that member. And again, that member is the one that asked for us to specifically say what we wanted. If what we wanted is something that can't be supported over there, then it, we'll have gone through the exercise and won't have a bill. But I offer the 2-year timeline as something that, if we pass it for 2 years, it was passed for 1 year, and so it actually applies for third graders this year, that the test is not an absolute and a portfolio can substitute. We would be getting 2 more years, and at that point it would be de facto the situation for 3 years if that in case had passed, and we can determine whether the whole system has fallen apart at that point and whether we can continue to get that forever. But I think to have created that situation as a de facto circumstance for 3 years gives us a much bigger platform to get it forever.
You just said 3 years.
Well,
We already got 1 year.
Last year, there was an accountability bill that passed last year that actually waived the third grade exam as being an absolute for promotion retention decisions this year. So this would add 2 more years to that circumstance, which would give us 3.
Mr. Teuber.
We don't have, contrary to what people may believe, we don't have legislators, they're just now starting to understand or feel the pressure because there hasn't been enough public pressure on state legislators. They're just not, they're focusing on school boards, and they just haven't felt the pressure. And so they're only slightly moved that they're willing to listen, but they're not willing to make big inroads, and they're not willing to take on a lot of the establishment up north. And I can almost say without fear of contradiction, if we don't put a 2-year limit, we will not get a Senate sponsor. Our Senate, our Senate delegates are much more seasoned. They have a lot more riding on what they're doing and where they're going and what they have in front of them to be able to get them to do this. They're not doing it because that's not the water that they want to carry. They're going to do it for us. They won't pick that type of fight. That's not, they're not, I don't believe that we can get them to sign up for that type of fight. And I think that we would get nowhere. And and if people say, well, we just got to have that, we got to, as Dr. Graham said, storm the Bastille, we won't get to the gate. And that's not helping our kids.
And I understand that because back in August when we got something, and then that was better than nothing. And I completely understand that. So that brings me to the next question. Is there any way that we can approve this? And Mr. Martin, you would have to tell me this. Is there any way that we can eliminate that language, but put a caveat in there that it can be added if it is the deal breaker? That we take it out. We take, like we've got these others, reduce the number, and it's writing. There's no time limit. So is there a way we can go? Remove the third grade English language arts exam as a requirement for fourth grade promotion, and then just period right there. However, we write a caveat to the recommendation to say that in discussions, if he sees that it won't fly and it's going to be a deal breaker, that we will empower these two to put that language in.
Yes, I think you certainly can take that action if that's the board's desire.
Okay, so let's find out what the board's desire is. Mr. Teuber.
I mean, I will serve the will, I will do what the majority of the board is, but I know that Bob's cringing as much as I am. That, I mean, this, you're killing me. I mean, we're going out there and begging our legislature to give us something that we can get so that we can get our community to support. And if they won't sponsor it, we've got no push point, we've got no fulcrum, and all we're going to have, all these people are going to be mad at us and still in here, and we're going to say, we can't make the change, we can't empower the change, and we have no way to get a conduit to blow it open further. And you know, if the legislature doesn't start feeling pressure from all different bunch of districts that something's wrong and that they better start, you know, looking at this. And again, the 2-year doesn't mean just because we get a 2-year doesn't mean we stop and wait, sit on our laurels for 2 years. But if we don't start getting people realizing and getting people to look at the subject matter, and it's not going to get. It's got to get on the floor of the Senate. It's got to get on the floor of the House. So we actually have to have a bill that's actually going to be presented, and then there's going to be discussions. And at that point, the FSBA can roll out. At that point, I expect everyone in this seat, everyone here, to be up there saying their piece up in Tallahassee. And I'm taking roll, and we'll see how many people are really serious. But if we don't get up there and do that, and every county brings their own, it still won't matter. I mean, it's still, we have a legislature that has an agenda, and they're moving along, and I'm not even, can't even say that it's an agenda that's wrong. You know, they think they're doing the right thing on accountability and so on. They just haven't talked to educators, and they're so far removed from the classroom that they don't understand the impact and the things that they're doing, what the unintended consequences are. And so, and if we don't get people up there to be able to tell them that, and enough of them so that it matters, we're not getting anywhere. And so, you know, I'm just trying to say, you know, I'm as frustrated, trust me. You know, I have all these conversations with people that say that they want all these things, and so do I. But you have to be realistic.
Well, due to the hour that...
Excuse me.
Just to note, the way the language is, it doesn't say for 2 years. It says for no less than 2 years. It does not, it shows that our design, it gives the, it's implied that we would like it to be more than 2 years. And I can live with I can go either way. I just want guidance as to know, I don't want to send this person away. I think I know who it is. I don't want to just, you know, have him just say, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, you know. So I need some, and I think you know who it is. Will he slam the door in the face?
And they're telling you yes.
Yes.
Then I say, I can live with it saying no promotion for less than 2 years. Because that does imply we would like it to be longer.
For no less than 2 years.
So no less than 2 years.
Mrs. Dozier? You're in? Okay. We're good. Okay. Next one. Remove the state test requirements for graduation for no less than 2 years. Comments? Everybody's good with that?
And I should just make the note too. It's for 2 years, starting in the following calendar year. So if we address this year the way that we have whether we have the power or the authority to do it or not, we have to do it because the ship's already left the dock. So if we don't do something, it's not going to happen. That's where, if you want to get out there and get wild and crazy, that's where we're going to take the heat.
Crazy.
But so it's really a 3-year time span. So I mean, it just and maybe that, you know, what we do this year that's, you know, a little bit questionable whether or not it's actually right. If there's
whether
other,
the
if there's,
state thinks it's
that's right. Whether the state thinks it's right. Very good point. You know, if there's legislation that's following it that is something, they may not. You know, hey, we got to take every piece, and so it's really a 3-year when you think about it. We're dealing with 3 years of kids.
Okay. Any other comment? No? We're good. Okay. And, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said something, Bob. Eliminate school grades for no less than 2 years. Is there any discussion about that? Okay. And eliminate additional state sanctions under differentiated accountability for no less than 2 years. Mrs. Dozier? No?
No, I'm going to go with the flow.
Okay. All right. And we're taking the PERT test off the list, so we have the 6. All right. And we're almost at our meeting time.
We are at our meeting time.
Yep, okay.
I think you can just adjourn
Sarah.
and then go right into that other.
That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so this meeting is adjourned unless there's any comment to be made by anybody at the dais. No, we're done? Mr. Twyber, you have a comment?
Actually, I did, that I wanted to bring up, and it was just that because of the time frame and where we are, to bring up in the workshop to ask for a special board item. You know, we had a letter from the AIG that was to address that we have 30 days to address, and with the calendar days, we have no action meetings between the time that it's came due and the time it's due. And
Staff is off for 2 weeks.
So I would like to bring forth, have Mr. Martin, I would like the board chair to find good cause that the board attorney bring back language similar to the language that was brought back when almost a similar thing was alleged that occurred at this board. There has been some allegations that went beyond kind of what you feel like is grand jury probable cause for an investigation that we've been charged by the state pursuant to statute to do an investigation. And I know that typically you can do that in-house. It's kind of hard when you have the person that's been put under the allegations to direct the people to do the investigation about the same person. So I would like the board attorney to recommend that this board adopt language that we hire an outside third-party counsel to do this investigation, get it done, get a report, send it back up to the state, whatever they find, and act accordingly. So we have transparency, that we have a unbiased investigation. We don't go through the debacle that no, we're good, and the state says no, you're not. I mean, it was just a travesty of what the last board did. It just was. And it didn't build up any credibility with our community. And so there's an allegation. It is what it is. I believe we just need a third party to investigate it and move on.
Well, one of the mistakes made the last time was that people didn't follow the advice of the board attorney. So I'm going to turn to the board attorney and ask him to speak to the conversation we have had and conversations he has had.
Well, I did have a conversation earlier today with the Director of Investigations at the DOE Office of the Inspector General to try to get a sense of the nature of the investigation that the IG was expecting, what they would consider to be sufficient, and ask the question in terms of whether it would be acceptable to the IG for the investigation to be performed by district staff, by superintendent staff, or if there was a need to have an independent investigator outside the school district. The response I received was that it depends, basically. If the investigation performed by the superintendent staff and submitted to the IG provides sufficient documentation to refute the allegations, then that would be sufficient. That they're not necessarily expecting that it has to be an independent investigator from outside the school district. And certainly anything that was submitted, there would be that independent state authority of the IG's office that would look at that and make a decision on whether that's sufficient to refute the allegations. And if the answer is no, of course, they would provide direction back to the school board to take further action.
Ms. Labrie.
There's one question that comes to me, and that is the fact that today is December the 10th. So we're looking at January 9th, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, excuse me. I should share that out in that conversation. I also discussed the timing, and the information that was provided to me is that they understand that there's a holiday break coming up, that if there's a need, that we'd grant more time for that purpose.
Right. Because I know our staff's going to be out of office for 2 weeks.
Other comments?
Again, just to address Mr. Martin's conversation, I think that they would allow, or they said that it might be appropriate I still think that for, you know, if you do the outside counsel and you do it, then you're not, you know, you have a choice of A and B. You have the right way and you have a way that may be right. And I don't want to go with maybe right. I just want to get it done. I want the investigation. I want the data brought together in an impartial manner, have them ask the questions that a third party would ask independently, address the concerns, and put it to bed. We just don't have the time to go through iterations to have them come back and say it's not quite enough. You know, we just, where you have so much to do and so much, so many issues. It came up. We need to address it. We need to move on. And you know, this is a type of time when you talk about, you know, spending money efficiently and wisely. This is it to put money where it's best spent. Hire it independently. Give them the information. Let them do the report. And then it puts our superintendent, her staff, beyond reproach, because they didn't give the, you know, exactly what it is, and we just don't rehash this, and we keep on going through the new year like we've seen before.
Mrs. Dozier.
Well, I did have a conversation with Mr. Martin this morning myself when I had looked over the information, and I also sent him an email last night after I had read my emails. And in that email, I took out a portion of the letter and copied and pasted it into the email. And when I saw, because I didn't, the only thing that I received was an email from you where you had sent it on to the superintendent.
Right.
Which, if you read that last letter, that's what I had concern with, was the handling of the way, the level that it went, because I was here when we received those letters before. Mm-hmm. And I take it as, I think, and I'm going to use the same language that I used several years ago. I think that's the fox watching the hen house, and that's what the public sees as well. I think that an in-house investigation is not the way to go. I think I want to clear it up, and I want to clear it up expediently. And I think the best way to do that is to go with a counsel that we already have a relationship with. I think that Mr. Martin knows who I'm talking about. In fact, I advocated that we get him before. We already have a relationship with an attorney that does this type of work, and I mean, he will do it. He'll get it done, and you know, maybe it'll put a stop to some of this. Wait a minute. Maybe it will. How do I want to phrase this? Maybe, well, you know, it'll just stop some of this these allegations that continue to be made, you know. And maybe if we get somebody who is very respected in the state to send it up to IG and say, wait a minute, you know, blah, 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 blah. So that's where I am.
Ms. LaRiviere?
If I could, Ms. Morgan, just to share a bit more information that might be helpful in decision. Anticipating the discussion this evening, I did have conversation with Mr. Gonzalez, who Ms. Dozier is referring to, and
You sure that's who I was referring to?
I'm pretty sure.
It was.
He did indicate his willingness, his ability to perform that service. I asked him to provide me some financial information. His estimate that it would be no more than $10,000. Likely it would be less than that.
Okay.
I have the utmost respect for our superintendent. I don't want there to be anything that would cause anyone to say, well, wait a minute, it wasn't done the right way. And so I believe the best way is to have somebody come in from the outside, so then there won't be any accusations one way or the other.
Okay, I agree. Oh, Mrs. Dozier.
And if I can just say one other thing about this. You know, right now, the media has this, and the media, the report that was done last night was very damaging because it was one-sided. Exactly. And this will also put a stop to that one-sided monologue that's going on. We need to have a dialogue, and this will give a dialogue to it.
Okay. All right, so you have the direction
Yes,
of the
if
board.
I could just provide a little bit of advice and ask for clarification on a couple of things. First,
Sure.
if I could provide a caution, the complaint Any complaint and any resulting investigative materials against an employee of the school district are confidential until the completion of that investigation. So I would advise you that it's going to be prudent to not have any discussion about the context, about the contents of the complaint. I realize that it's already been made public, but not by the school district. So as the school board, you should avoid having conversation about that. So I will prepare, my understanding is that my direction is to prepare a good cause item to bring to the meeting that will start soon. I will need a little bit of time to do that.
Okay.
Is could we, no, he's not here.
Mr. Dodig, no, he's not,
Could
he's
he
not
sit
here,
in
I'm
for the
sorry.
first part of the meeting?
So we'll call, what, a 15-minute recess?
At least 15 minutes, and in the interim, we'll need somebody here to receive public comment cards because, of course, at the special meeting, there's an opportunity.
Linda, can we ask you to do that, please? Okay. All right, so it's,
She may need to give assistance to Keith because I don't know that anyone's
think
here
I think
to
Jennifer
assist
is.
him.
Jen's here.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure that I know his
I can't
handwriting and I know
myself.
his
Yes,
typing
ma'am.
abilities are not very good.
One more thing really quick. I would just like to also make a special notice to thank Linda for this meeting is not our scheduled time, and to make the sacrifices that she did to be here, and also to allow both of our secretaries had conflicts, and she actually took the bullet for our team, and I just wanted to personally say thank you for that in public, that she's doing that in this short notice, so thank you.
She's usually at church every Wednesday night.
okay, well, this meeting is adjourned until 7:30. Well, we'll start the special school board meeting at 7:30.
We'll need to make sure. If they inform anyone coming in that the special meeting is going to begin at 7:30, not to
Okay.
leave, that it will begin.
Okay.